Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates. As India begins its third phase of unlocking, gymnasiums, restaurants for dinner, and even yoga classes will be allowed to open, but not schools. I went on Twitter to say, does this make sense? And I got a volley of angry parents writing to me saying, how can you even ask this question? As somebody who's traveled on the ground for 4 months, I have gone from being someone who supported the lockdown to actually becoming a vociferous critic of it, because I am not sure that the lockdown is actually helping. I think many of our assumptions about this virus have also been called into question. All of this has happened at a time when a very, very important serological survey from Mumbai is pointing towards herd immunity. This survey showed that 57% of Mumbai slum residents had been infected with COVID, but had actually just recovered on their own without even knowing that they had the infection. And since the sample was not taken in containment zones, the number could actually be much higher. So if there is herd immunity, shouldn't we be talking on priority about unlocking schools? The center, on the other hand, says herd immunity as a concept is not even a strategic option for India. On the program today, a special panel of many angry parents who are extremely vociferous that they do not want to send their children to school. Is this, by the way, an elitist class divide? We're not even talking about poor children who can't even join online classes. And we're also joined by Dr. Jayanti Shastri of the Kasturba Hospital, who was one of the key people who did that serological survey and found that 57% of Bombay slum residents were infected. Annie Koshi, well-known educationist, has been in the business and the profession of education for decades. And we have three parents, Swati Bhaskar, Tanu Behel, and Diba Ghazal. We did hope to have some fathers on as well, but the only father who volunteered to be part of this program, we can't get him up from Bangalore. And the moment he's able to join, we'll bring him into the conversation as well. So let me start, before I come to Dr. Shastri, to get a quick reactions from the parents. Diba, why do you think schools should not open?
Well, Varkha, we all know that it's still a long haul. Like, it's not like the pandemic is going to end in another month or two. And the information and misinformation that's communicated is like immense. I don't know what to believe, what not to believe. One time the WHO says it's not community pandemic, like you can't really be spreading it through community. Then it comes, another study says if you're in an AC room enclosed with people, it can be airborne. So the thing is, we don't really have an information. It's an ongoing research and processes. We still don't have the cure. How feasible it is to risk your kids going out to school and traveling. You know, it's like an added burden, the travel. And then what about the red zones and green zones? The schools in the red zones are going to stay locked. The green zones are open.
So one of the interesting comments you make is about the constantly changing science, but that is the nature of the pandemic. You have new information, you adapt to it. Let me ask you, Tanu, you also wrote me a very angry letter saying, how can you even ask this question? Are you not worried about the quality of education your children is receiving? Do you not think that there's something discordant in the fact that we've opened almost everything else? We're back to traffic jams in our cities. We're back to eating out. We're back to jogging. We're back to running. But we're okay with our children sitting and staring at a computer screen all day.
So, Barkha, for me, I think I've lowered my expectations for this year, and I'm open to lowering them for the coming year as well. I'm okay with him, and my son is in primary, so I think I don't feel the pressure of studies as much as parents with older children would feel. He's 6, and I think I can still manage many of his educational needs from home. So I think that gives me confidence. I don't want to comment if he was in grade 8, what I would think. But I also want to come in and comment on, I agree children from underprivileged areas are not in school. But when I speak to my domestic worker, she's also not willing to send her child to school. I think it's a question of survival. I'm opposed to lockdown when it comes to small businesses surviving, but here, if we are able to manage education, even if in a slightly lower framework of expectations and quality, I think I would go for it rather than sending the children back to school.
Okay, let me get Swati Bhaskar, the third parent, to add, and then we can go to the experts. Swati, go ahead.
Right. So I have a bit of a different take here, because I'm a parent, okay, but I am very, very empathic towards our teachers as well. Nobody has spoken about the safety of, making your teachers secure.
Yeah.
And more so when I know the age group that they're in, in the in the middle age, they are more at a threat than our own kids. Like, as you said, there are so many people who got the disease and they were cured, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about the security of teachers, neither the schools nor the parents. Kids, of course, are not concerned with this argument at this point of time. But I would not send my daughter back to school because I know I'm putting my teacher at risk.
Okay, so I'm glad you've spoken up for the teachers. Now let's get the educationists and the doctor. Dr. Shastri, given that you seem fairly convinced that your serological survey does indicate the beginnings of herd immunity, why should we not open schools? If herd immunity is a reality, why should we not open schools?
So the first thing I would like to say is that definitely, like Deepa said, there is a lot of misinformation. So the most important thing is the herd immunity is, again, we don't know whether it is 60% antibody seroprevalence. So I'm sure everybody knows what is the seroprevalence. It is the presence of antibodies in the blood. And that happens even in an asymptomatic infection. And there has been, so our study has shown that there has been an asymptomatic transmission. In the slums, it is about 57%, but in the non-slums, it is 16%. Having said that, the second important thing which I would like to really highlight is this is a new virus. We are still trying to understand the nuances of the virus. As very rightly said, initially the WHO said it is only by contact. They never spoke about the aerosol transmission. Of late, they're talking about the aerosol transmission. When as scientists, we knew that there is aerosol transmission. Otherwise, such an infection cannot happen. Then they started talking about the climate. You know what? In a hot climate, it will not survive. But if you see what happens in a hot climate, it is the droplet which evaporates. And the virus can remain as a droplet nuclei. So what we are seeing in Mumbai is that with the rains, the cases have gone down. So it's like, so basically, is the droplet settling down? So what I'm trying to say is we're still understanding the transmission.
So can I ask you a direct question? As a doctor, would you want to see schools open?
No.
At this point?
No.
Okay.
See, we are frontline workers. I am seeing my own physician colleagues, how they are treating these patients. Let me tell you, there is still no single evidence which says which individual is going to progress to severe disease.
Okay.
Why do young people without comorbidity develop severe disease? We have young doctors. Currently, there are 4 doctors who are in the age group of 25 to 30. They have serious, severe COVID disease. Having said that, when we are seeing so many varied cases, I think we should not subject small children. And we have reported from the Wadia Hospital in Mumbai about the post-inflammatory syndrome in children. There are 100 cases which have been reported, and this has been reported from New York also. New York has reported a number of such cases of post-inflammatory syndrome in kids.
And when you say kids, can you just give the age group? Because this is a very important fact.
And we say so the age group which has been in this study in Wadia Hospital has been right from age 3 to age 10.
Okay, so that's a very important fact you're sharing. So you would just not, you're basically what I'm hearing Dr. Shastri you're saying is we just don't know enough. Even now, we don't know enough about this virus to take a chance with children. Annie, how do you make sense of all of this? Because on the one hand, we are telling people get on with your lives, wear a mask, in crowded spaces, go for a walk, get back to work, at least if not at 100%, but like I said, our metropolitan cities in the north, at least in the west also, south is still struggling, have returned almost to normal. So how long can we hunker down given that the virus doesn't seem to be going and given that we don't have a finite time for this vaccine?
think, the whole dilemma seems to be very apparent among the panelists themselves. And, from one side, we have the great, misinformation environment that is there. And the other one, we have a very informed, presentation by Dr. Shastri out there. And listening to Dr. Shastri, of course, one would say that it seems to be very stupid to bring children into school when such things are happening. I would have liked to ask this, 100 cases that are there in Boria Hospital, are they from, the economically challenged category, or are they from, the well-off category? Because, well, the economically challenged category is anywhere out on the road, in groups, in gangs, playing around. So, it would be interesting that who is actually leading this narrative? Because
that's a very good question.
Television and everything. We're only talking about the middle and the upper middle class who are in AC rooms. I mean, Deepa just now said, AC rooms. So, what happens to children who have actually, the school is the only safe place actually.
It's a very interesting question.
Where you get your food, you get some actual proper care. And what happens to those children?
Dr. Shastri, can you clarify on the socioeconomic background of these 100 children who have shown post-inflammatory signs after having recovered from COVID?
So these, Wadia Hospital generally has experts. So the socioeconomic status of the patients coming to Wadia Hospital could be either middle class, or it could be low middle class or low socioeconomic. But having said that, everything is a trade-off. Do you want to put your children to risk at the cost that, the healthcare infrastructure is not able to cope? Today, we are actually up to the brim. It is only now that we've got a breather. The cases have gone down. But Mumbai was in a grip. At one point, we thought that the healthcare infrastructure is not going to be adequate. ICUs are not going to be adequate. Having said that, even New York City has declared closed schools till December 31st. They are not going to open.
But here's the point. Why we are not New York, Dr. Shastri, is because we have a digital divide. We have a socio-economic divide. In our country, when we tell people to stay at home, and you know this, you're from Mumbai, in our bastis, there are 8 people living in one room. And so therefore, what is the notion of the safety of staying at home? So just park that thought. Let me get another round from the parents. Deepa, would you be willing to have your child lose a school year? Somebody wrote that to me today, that let my child lose a year. I don't care. I don't care. I'd rather have my child drop a year. And what is the quality of online classes that you're finding? How are those going?
First of all, don't we need to come up with a policy where we ease on the examinations and the stress of really going through the examination process for this year? Because there's a new pandemic. We have never faced this kind of situation before. So I think the policymakers and educationalists, they need to come up with something which eases the burden on the schools and kids and parents itself. Going through with that, online classes, they are very rigorous. Kids are saying we are getting lots of assignments. We are like jam-packed for the whole week because as it is, they have their exams, Monday UTs and everything lined up. So it's not a breather for students. It's not easy if the students or the kids are at home. It's the same for them. They are really asking the class teachers and everybody to ease the burdens of giving homework or assignments. So for the kids, it's the same. It's just that they are not traveling, not risking themselves going to schools.
Okay.
But I'd just like to add, Barkha, like I read this news, White House Health Advisor Dr. Fauci, he's warned parents sending kids back to school because he says children over 9 years old can spread the virus as well as any adult can. So it's not that this is a safe group and that is not a safe group. It's
Okay. But the one point that you make is that the experience of online classes is the same. I just want to share some of the data. Only 11% of India actually has access to a computing device. In rural India, only a little over 15% have internet access compared to 42% in urban India. So really, when we have this conversation, we are talking about two Indias. Even within our cities, we're talking about two Indias, right? So we have to remember that. We also have poor families who have enrolled their children in private schools, and those private schools are still charging full fees, even though there are no children going to them. So, I think we need to realize that there is not one India. Tanu and Swati, let me bring you in. Tanu, go ahead.
So I do agree that we're talking about two Indias, and therefore I think while the privileged lot I think that most of us are in should continue with online classes. It was a little difficult in March when everybody was caught unawares, but I think now that we are in end of July, the school has optimized quite a lot in terms of online learning. But the focus should be on the other India, which doesn't have this access. And I do wonder if it's possible to record some of these classes, make them available. If it's possible to look at community structures, NGOs that can, because even NGOs are fully, they are working on COVID recovery more than the other things they were looking at. So I think going back and looking at the structures, looking at the spread of internet and making the smart devices free, looking at apps, tying up. I think there's a lot that can be done. We really need to unpack it at many levels. But for now, the privileged ones, I think we are going fine. So the attention can be taken off this and focused on the other India.
Okay, Swati, let me bring you in here. There are two, three different things. There's a quality of education, but Annie Koshi makes the point about the school often being a safe space for people. For example, if you lived in a room with 7 other people, possibly in your school playground, you're going to be safer than you are in your home. So this stay-at-home slogan that we applied uniformly to India may not be true all the time, right? At least for poorer families. The second thing, and I'll ask Dr. Shastri about it in a moment, the second thing we're seeing is that people sitting at home are just getting COVID. We have no idea from whom, from where or whom. Take the Bachchan family, for example. It doesn't get posher than that. It doesn't get richer than that. I don't think they were going out into the bastis. I don't think they were going out into anywhere that made them vulnerable, but they got COVID. So if this virus is just going to be part of our lives, how long are we going to hide from it? Is it not better to find a way to adapt to it with as many precautions as is possible? I'll take that from Swati and then I'll come to you, Annie. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just tackle all of these issues one by one, talking about the pressure, the exam. Thanks to our new education policy, which came into force yesterday, there are going to be second short board examinations. There's going to be more stress on skill development. There's going to be more stress on holistic education as far as state education is concerned. Talking about the quality of classes that my daughter has been, going through for the last 2.5 months now, they've been par excellent. I mean, they've been par excellent. And it's for the first time that I was able to see the kind of efforts that our teachers are putting in to whatever knowledge she's imbibing in the course of studying from.
I'm glad you have that experience, because in my travels, the children I have met are not very happy with online classes. Actually, I get the opposite feedback. Like, I think
No. I mean,
but you don't feel that. You don't feel that.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
In fact, I have become a more participative parent since she started, taking her kids to school from home. And as far as the lesser privileged children are concerned, of course, the motto is to maintain physical distancing. So of course they can start at some smaller strength schools in the hinterlands of our country, but the major problem is digital infrastructure, which is definitely not there. So that is there, like it's been there for ages, right? And second, of course, not being educated in their own regional languages, which is a huge barrier for them to get
So that's a whole different debate. I want to take this back to Dr. Shastri. The language debate will take us in a completely different direction. Dr. Shastri, I think my question is twofold. One, if you can tell us a little more about these 100 children, because that thing has really stayed with me. Were they children who had recovered from COVID?
So they had COVID at some point, because see, what happens is that how do you limit COVID within the body? It is your immune system.
Yeah.
So it is your immune system, the way it reacts. So children have a better immunity, and that is the reason the disease doesn't flare up. But there are a large number of them who have a sequelae. So this post-inflammatory syndrome is like a sequelae to COVID disease. So when there are documented cases, well, there is a cause of concern. But my question to all the parents is, how comfortable are you yourself when you go out grocery shopping or going to the market? when you yourself are not, see, I am a grandmother and a mother, of course. So I do understand the apprehensions which everybody has with reference to their kids.
Yeah.
When you are not comfortable, how many doctors are not comfortable coming to the hospital? Medical students are all on leave. They have not reported as of now. Only there are some volunteers. When it is happening with the medical school students and parents are not comfortable about going anywhere, how will they send their children?
Okay. Does any parent want to answer that? How comfortable are you? Because that's what I keep saying. Have you started getting back to your life, Tanu, as you knew it?
No, I mean, I wear a mask. I do only the essential bit. It's a strange feeling to just walk out. Everybody seems like they're a carrier. You maintain distance. I mean, it's not normal. And when my son talks to me, he takes off his mask because he thinks he cannot get through to me without keeping his mask on. And to expect children to go back wearing masks, they will not probably follow all these guidelines. It also may not be healthy. I mean, we haven't even, I think, found a consensus on what is the right kind of mask. That's another worry I keep thinking.
And also, Annie, I'm coming to you in just a second, but Dr. Shastri, I read about this young man who died. He was out for a jog and he was jogging with his mask on. And, that can't be safe. And every evening when I go for a walk, I walk without a mask because it's open. I'm not, bumping into you and it's an open ground. Everybody's walking with a mask. I have no idea why they're walking with a mask. So there's a lot of confusion even among adults.
So that's what I'm saying. There is misinformation. And she very rightly said, what is the kind of mask we wear? So N95 masks have to be worn only in the hospital in a healthcare setting. Otherwise, you can wear why are you wearing a mask?
Yeah.
You're just wearing a mask to protect yourself from any aerosols falling on your nose or on your mouth. Okay. A simple cloth mask is enough to prevent that. So, but having said that, when I go for a walk, I do keep a mask with me, okay, dangling around my neck, only because if somebody comes to talk to me, I can wear it.
Then you can wear it.
Yeah. Not for while you're walking, because, and if people are wearing an N95 mask, it is a carbon dioxide which you're
what if we look at a situation where our children have to go into classrooms wearing masks? Is that something that we need to start imagining?
You cannot control. How will you control? Who will control? You think the kids are going to keep it? They're going to, as soon as they're uncomfortable, they're going to remove it. At home also, they will remove it, and they will remove it in the class. They will say the teacher is going to be stressed out. I just can't imagine the stress I have only one thing. Give this virus some time, understand it better before you jump the gun and just, and let me tell you, gyms in Maharashtra have not opened because in the gym, you can't gym with a mask on. And it is, I can't imagine disaster looming in a gymnasium where people are all without a mask and they're all exercising,
So you would be opposed to gymnasiums opening?
Absolutely.
You'd be opposed to that? It's actually the juxtaposition, Annie, that seems weird, that you have gyms opening and malls opening. And I understand the need for the economy to get back on track. I really do. There are very critical livelihoods involved. But, then you see what? I mean, our schools aren't open and our gyms are open. But Dr. Shastri is making the important point that she's totally opposed to that. Annie, you've been waiting to make your point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, I find this whole Corona time has actually asked us to look at and clarify our whole idea of education. What is this education? When we say that kids can, have a gap year is a very, very elitist concept. I mean, our children are anyway in gap years all the time. They have gaps in their education. So when they say they can sit, somebody has talked about skills and holistic. Let me tell you, skills and holistic education and second shot have all been there before. It's nothing new that's coming up in the national education policy. And ultimately, it's how you implement all of this that will be important. Our previous policies have all been very good, but have not been implemented properly. So having said that, we at least see that, in a classroom or an online classroom, to put the onus back on the parent as the first educator. That is one thing. To put the onus back on learning to learn, teach a child to fish rather than give the fish. So that whole concept of ab teacher padhayegi, classroom bana ke, that is shifting. In all good schools it shifts, and we put the back so that you learn to read, you learn to sort of think, rather than, so good classrooms would have that. So having said that, then all this is not available to so many children. And I feel that when we say, government should make a policy, what happened to our own brains? If a school is opened, can a parent decide for himself or herself that should I send or should I not send? The school will have a policy that today this cohort will be.
So what are you suggesting? Are you suggesting a phased opening of schools, Annie?
What I'm saying is that the government should say if schools want to open, they can open one, but within a certain policy. And the policy is that at all times there will be a very low cohort in the school. Okay. So suppose I'm saying that I'm only going to open for classes 1, 2, and 3, say, for today, on Monday. Then 1, 2, and 3, parents have an option. So I'm saying all 1, 2, and 3 don't have to come in, because I will also give you online and I will give you offline also. So those who come in, what I'm saying is let them exercise their judgment. So you are in a quarantine area or a containment area, don't send your kid. Or the school is in one such place, it should not open. So, the context and every individual context is so different that I think to ask for a blanket policy, you said 2 Indias, it's not 2 Indias.
It's many Indias.
Indias, And you can't even talk of it all in one breath. And that is why parents should exercise an option, I feel. Schools should create the safe space. They should be held responsible for creating safe space. There should be guidelines for schools to create safe space. Having said that, again and again, when you read, where is the funding for that? If we are going to spend our money on building a new parliament, then, obviously we don't have money to build any schools or to make schools safe. That is the...
You've given us a specific suggestion, and I want in our last comments our panel to respond to it. A phased, regulated opening of schools, where it's up to schools, where we are looking at a new model, Tanu, of education, where parents are choosing offline, online, depending on the reality maybe of your city, maybe of your neighborhood. Does that seem what?
And also, sorry to interrupt, Barkha, but parents who are going to work, school was also a creche of some kind.
No,
and
I agree.
Going to work, say we can't monitor their online.
And for women, this is particularly difficult. I think
a particular problem of the urban woman,
and I'd say for professional women, this is going to create all kinds of. I think the next thing you'll see is women dropping out of the workforce because they will not know how to look after children, how to look after their work. There are all kinds of problems that are going to come from this. So quick reactions. I'll give Dr. Shastri the last word. But the 3 parents, quick reactions to Annie's suggestion: a phased neighborhood-specific opening of schools where the choice is with the parents. Tanu, would you support that?
I said I'm all for choice. I just want to also say that the time the schools have, maybe this is the time to look at an online model. We'll need a blended model if we give choice. But the same teacher cannot deliver an online and an offline model. So we need more skill building, and I would say even skill building for parents, because many of us want to do the foundational learning at home and works for my primary grade child.
Deva, what do you think?
I'd just like to add that I have 2 daughters, both in different schools. So as it is, it's going to be very difficult for me to manage which school is opening, which is not opening, where to send. I would really like to keep the choice with the parent. If they want to send or they want to keep the kids at home and make them study online, I'm all for that. Because I don't think there is a short way to ensure that the teachers and staff will have that discipline and vigilance on children about sanitizing and distancing and the surfaces they are touching like a parent would, because they have to teach. So I am all for staying at home, making the kids stay at home and having online classes.
Okay, Swati, since you've been talking about teachers and how nobody talks about teachers, in Annie's model, we're assuming that teachers are ready to go back to school. They may not be.
We can give the option to the teachers.
I know, but there's so many options. Where do we have so many people? But it's a thought worth considering.
Okay, so I don't think the kind of mentality that the school's management has, where they give a choice or an option to the teachers. They will make it mandatory for the teachers to do both. I mean, the same teacher to teach on premise and take the online classes both. So I don't think that's an option. Where because again, a school is again a business, right? And business continuity is also important to them. And it's a workplace as well. And it's a workplace as well, right? Like, for example, most of the organizations have cut down the staff, on-premise staff, to about 30%. And the organizations are absolutely work from home. So for me, it's going to be absolutely, study at home, teach from home.
Study at home, teach from home.
If I could just say that when the teacher takes the class itself is beamed online. Teacher doesn't have to do 2 classes. The class itself will be.
I see. So you don't need 2 sets of teachers. Yeah. I get that. Dr. Shastri, would you accept this phase? The reason I am asking you this is because I keep thinking, ye kitni der aur aap zindagi ro ke reh sakte hain. Suppose vaccine trial nahi work hota. Suppose aapko December mein Oxford vaccine trial kehta hai, no, it didn't work. We are still scared of herd immunity as a way forward. What are we going to do? How long are we going to not send children to school? Or are we now saying maybe our world is just going to shift online in a permanent sort of way and the nature of education is going to have to change?
I have 2 things to say. The medical part, I will tell you. But I also feel about underprivileged children, especially the girl child. Once somebody gets used to the girl child helping out in the house, how many families will again send them back to school? That is my concern. I really don't have an answer for that. And I'm sure there should be some NGOs coming forward to help them out in these situations. And somewhere the digital technology has to, go into the homes and offer them education. How it is going to happen, who's going to do it, I don't know. Talking about the medical part, see, we still don't know whether these antibodies which are there are protective or not. Because there are early reports which say that after 3 months, these antibody levels wane. When they wane, are they adequate enough to confer protection? Again, I would like to leave it at this note because the science is really advancing, as well as every day we are learning about this disease. But I would like to end this conversation with a very happy note that the frontline workers, please think about the families, the husband and wife who are doctors. It's so hard for them because how do they educate the child at home? No mother-in-law is able to cope with all that. So, it's like calling friends. Okay, my child, can you just help her or him with the online classes? So it's very hard for the parents who are working. The happy note I would like to share is that we did screen a lot of our frontline workers for the presence of antibodies. And Barkha, it's a good news that nobody has seroconverted. They've been treating patients for 3 to 4 months, wearing adequate PPE. I'm talking about a government hospital. Fortunately, PPEs are available. But in 4 months, all my friends religiously every month get their antibody test, but none of them have tested positive, which means if you take precautions, if you protect yourself well, you will not get infected. Having said that, slum is good news, asymptomatic transmission, but non-slums, we are still, paranoid about a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Let's have some parliament sessions in progress before really risking kids.
I think that's a fair point. Let grown-ups lead by example. I think that is a fair point to make. Thank you so much to the parents. It was not my intention to suggest that parenting is done only by women. We did reach out online to many parents, and as I said, a father did write in his connection couldn't work from Bangalore. The reason I make this point is it's a very deeply strenuous time for women. I think Dr. Shastri makes the point that when both people are out, have to go to work, and Annie made the point, school was like a kind of daycare, and there's suddenly like nowhere to leave your children. These are also realities of urban India that we live in. Thank you so much to the three parents for sharing their stories, and for Annie and Dr. Shastri. Pleasure, as always, learned so much. And we'll keep coming back to this story because like the virus, I think every day is going to bring a new set of questions. Thank you very much.